and welcome to a brand new episode of the Ins and Outs of Work. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Neely, Dell, it's so nice to be here. I'm happy. Thank you for having me. A little bit about what I do. I help teams and individuals make the most of their moments by teaching them a system based in attention management, because I believe that attention management is the more relevant path to productivity today.
That's exactly what we wanted to talk about today, Maura, and you've already touched on that difference between time management and attention management. And obviously time management is something that we hear a lot about in our culture today, but it seems like you talk a lot more about attention management. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Time management was created decades, maybe a century ago, in a time when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have email, we didn't have internet-connected smartphones. Everyone had an office with walls and a door. And so you could manage your time, right? You could go into your office and you could put your desk phone on Do Not Disturb because that's all you had. And you could, say at 9 o'clock, I'll do this. And at 10 o'clock, I'll do this. And then at 10:30, you could open your door and do whatever needed to be done. No, people couldn't interrupt you. Well, those days are gone, right? The world is a completely different place right now. Number one, we can't manage time, right? It marches on no matter what we do. When I ask people, how do you manage time? They tell me, I make appointments with myself on my calendar. But the first person you will break an appointment with is yourself, right? And so we can't really manage time. When we try, it's not all that helpful. And the third problem I have with time management is that it's not that we all have days where we're like, man, I got so much done. I feel so great about that. And we have days, sadly, more of these, where we feel like I was busy all day and I got nothing done, right? And in both of those situations, you had the same amount of time. Right? It's not that you had more time one day and less time the different day. So the biggest problem in the 21st century is not that we don't have enough time. It's that we have too many distractions. And the antidote to distractions is attention. And so I think that this phrase time management as a frame for our productivity is really holding us back. And we need to kick it to the curb and embrace the idea of attention management.
There are so many things in that answer, Maura, that I find so true. For one, the fact that you state that time isn't a variable. We have the same amount of time every single day. That's very true. And I think the other thing that really resonates with me is how it is all about attention management. And I was going to ask you a question about, do you think that has become so much more difficult? But you already touched on that in your answer. What I am curious about, though, is how do you see let's call it responsibility for attention management? How do you see that being shared by individuals on the one hand and organizations and maybe HR on the other hand? Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah. We need a more realistic way to manage all of the details of our lives because work has changed, right? We are now in this knowledge work environment. Most of us who work in an office on a computer, right? We're knowledge workers. And so the most important tool that we bring to work with us every day is our brain. And the things that we're hired for, whether that's your wisdom and your skills and your knowledge and your experience, or whether it's your kindness and your compassion and your empathy and your ability to fit with the culture and, your ability to build relationships, all of those things come out of your brain. And so we are essentially hired for our brain power. And then the modern business environment is a situation where we can't even use that brain power. We can't apply that brain power fully. I call it brain power momentum. And so for HR managers, I think it's so important to recognize that managing the distracted world that we live in is not a skill that is taught anywhere. It's not taught in school. Most people have to get this on the job, and most people figure it out on their own to mixed results.
Maura, the last year or so has definitely given a new meaning to productivity. And there has been a lot of talk about productivity. Do you think that professionals and businesses, they are looking differently at productivity now than they did pre-COVID?
I do, because so many businesses were forced to send employees home to work remotely with no plan. But I actually think that this is a great thing because as I said, knowledge work is different, and tracking so productivity metrics for knowledge workers are very difficult to measure, right? Because knowledge work is about ideas and relationships and innovation and problem solving and analysis, right? And all those things that are hard to measure. And so the easiest thing to measure is, do people show up? Are they sitting at their desk? Does it appear like they're working? And so, managers would use that primarily. Do I see them working? And if I see them working, then, they must be doing a good job. At least they're dedicated, that kind of thing. And so then everybody went home, and now you don't know what people are doing. And it's a problem on both sides because leaders are unclear about how to measure whether or not people are producing an acceptable amount, and workers want to give the impression that they are definitely working when they are at home and not slacking off. And so the way to do that is to send communication. And so they're emailing and chatting and texting and slacking and all this kind of stuff all the time in an effort to show, see, I'm here, I'm available, I'm working, I'm reading things. But again, that just contributes to our distraction and prevents us from building up that brain power. I call it brain power momentum, right? From getting that brain power momentum to apply ourselves fully to our work. So it's a real challenge.
Yes, a really big challenge. And I guess COVID has been that thing that's forced us to rethink as organizations the fact that productivity isn't about just being, your bum on a seat in a sense, like in an office. So it's definitely been a journey. Wanted to dive more a little bit into maybe some unproductive behaviors. So you touched on the way that technology, maybe impacts productivity and how we're bombarded with things today. Can you give us maybe some examples of unproductive activities or behaviors?
Yeah, well, one of the most detrimental behaviors that is hard to recognize because it feels like it's productive, but that is multitasking. And we've heard about this a lot. People throw this word around all the time, but I think that it's not really widely understood what multitasking is. When we talk about how multitasking is bad, we mean a certain type of multitasking, and that is the kind of activities that use the same part of your brain, the kind of activities that you use at work, things like speaking and listening and reading and visual activities, seeing things and analyzing things. All of those things use the same part of our brain. And so when we talk about multitasking, what we really mean is switching between two of those things. So you're halfway typing an email and then you answer the phone and then you're back to where was I on this email? And then somebody comes in and, what can I do for you? And then a chat pops up. Hey, what is that? Hold on. You're in the middle of a sentence and you see a chat. And so then, right. And so it causes all of this sort of scrambling in our brain. But it feels like if I am working on all of these things, then I must be making more progress. And people say to me, I would never get anything done if it weren't for multitasking. But the truth is, studies show that you would get so much more done and the quality that you do it with would be much higher. So task switching is really what we need to think about when we say multitasking. And so single tasking, doing one thing at a time to a designated stopping point or to completion, and then switching. I tell my clients, check your communication as often as you feel like you need to. Just do it in between other things, not during other things.
Oh, really good perspectives, Maura. And I think it's so true. Like I think earlier in my career, I always get into this place where I'd be doing so many things, checking email, chat, trying to work. And then you get to this point where it's like, well, my brain is just like shut down. What am I even trying to do? And it's almost like a daily occurrence. Then you've like, maybe my brain doesn't work like this.
Yeah, it's really true that, and the biggest, I think, danger about distraction, and of course, the distraction is one of the things that leads us to the task switching, right? This happens and that happens and somebody walks in and the phone rings and the email pops up and the chat, right? Now, those are the things that cause us to switch our attention. And for most of us, we have created a habit of distraction. And the most detrimental thing about this habit of distraction is that it lies to us, right? We are so distracted that in the absence of distraction, we find ourselves bored and we seek out the distraction. So the constant distraction is chipping away at our attention span, chipping away at our ability to stay focused, but it's also chipping away at our patience because we expect something to happen every few minutes. And when it doesn't, we get impatient. And so because the distraction is shortening our attention span and shortening our patience, it makes us feel like those big hard things at work that we need to tackle, like not only that we can't do them, but we don't even want to do them. And that's the lie. Because when we do those things, that's when we feel accomplished. That's when we feel satisfied at work. That's what makes us say, man, that was such a good day. I got so much done. And so it's really insidious and it's such a big problem.
Yes. This is actually, I think we started to segue there towards the end into the next question, which I'm just really excited to get your answer on. Because when I think about productivity, I kind of really attach that to procrastination. And, I think some of us struggle with that more than others. So we talked there about distraction. And for me, there's another side that's potentially linked, like you were saying, is procrastination. So was keen, I guess the question is to get your sense on where does procrastination come from and like what's the root of it?
There could be many reasons for procrastination. One is that you just don't want to do whatever it is, right? It's a task that you don't enjoy. But a really common reason for procrastination is because we don't really know exactly what we need to do. We didn't give it enough thought, right? We'll write something on our list that is big, right? We start with the way we write things on our list tends to start with either big, vague verbs like organize and develop and implement, right? But those words don't mean anything, right? If I said to you, Neely, quick, implement, go, right? That word is not actionable. And so we look at those kinds of words on our list and we go, I don't even know what that means, right? Because it seems big and hard and I don't have time for this. I'm too impatient. I don't want to do it, right? And so, or we start with those big verbs, or we don't write any verb at all. We'll just say something like budget, right? And then it's like, I don't even know what that means. Forget it. And so that's a big common reason for procrastination that I see in my clients is that you haven't given any thought to what exactly is it that I need to do. And so I tell clients, and I write in my latest book, From To Do to Done, if you make your tasks very actionable, if you spend those few seconds on the front end and ask yourself, don't say budget, what do I need to do? Well, I need to enter last year's numbers into the spreadsheet first. Okay, write that on your list because that feels quick and easy and you're more likely to do it.
Interesting one, I find. So what you're saying is that a really big reason for procrastination is that we're just not clear enough in what we need to do as a task. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I can see how that works with those big words you talk about, like also create a strategy or implement this, or I can definitely see how these big words are being a bit of an obstacle. Something else I was wondering about, Maura, what about having to-do lists that are too long? There are so many tasks and you just don't know where to start. What about that?
Yeah, that's another thing I talk about in the book. A lot of people will prioritize by ABC or 1, 2, 3 or high, medium, low, but you have, 100 things to do. And people who learned how to prioritize with the ABC, right? It's like, okay, I have 100 things to do and 92 of them are high priority. How does that help me, right? It doesn't help at all. And so what I recommend in my book is to prioritize by due date. Now, I don't recommend that you necessarily put your tasks in your calendar, right? Because that's just making an appointment with yourself. And if it doesn't happen today, then I have to remember to drag it to tomorrow. And then we spend all this time rearranging our calendar. So I recommend keeping those things on your to-do list, on some sort of to-do list, preferably electronic, but then prioritizing them by saying, what seems like a good day to do this? Given everything else, given all the meetings, given everything else I have to do, what seems like a good day to do this? And when you do that, you also have to recognize we don't get a whole lot of stuff done in a day that's on our list. We do a million things in a day, but most of those things never even make it onto our list, right? It's all the communication and the meetings and the ad hoc conversations and the phone is ringing and all blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. We do all those things. What we have a hard time getting to is those things on our to-do list. And so when it comes to those things on our to-do list, what we end up doing, we normally do some small handful of those, 3, maybe 5. And of course it depends, right? A day with a lot of meetings, you might not do any of your tasks, but a day with few meetings, you might do more of your tasks. And so I recommend that people prioritize their task list by due date, but also recognize you're probably only going to do, try 3, right? 3 things. And so if you take that to-do list and you say, I'm going to do these tomorrow and these the next day and these the next day and these the next day, your days probably aren't going to go exactly to plan, but it's easier to just sort of rearrange and add new things. And I think that's a much better way to prioritize.
Great. Some great tips there for the listeners is to prioritize by due date and also just be a little more realistic. That's what I'm hearing. Be a little more realistic about what you can get done in a day. I know I really struggle with that. I think, sure, I'm going to get all this stuff done in a day, and I never do, but I don't learn. So that's a good one for me too. Brilliant. Thanks, Maura. What we thought could be great, because you've already touched on some really interesting terms. So some different phrases and some terms that people might not be up to date with or might not know too much about. So we thought we could do what we call a quickfire round, Maura, to just talk through maybe 3 of these terms, that some of which you've already brought up, and just give you maybe 20 to 30 seconds just to quickly explain what you mean by that term. So the first of those is brain power momentum. And you've mentioned that already in this conversation.
Yeah, brain power momentum is this idea that we have to get our head into something, right? Knowledge work is by definition a little bit challenging, right? It requires thought and effort, and it requires us to bring our full selves. And so I think of brain power momentum, just like, if you're getting momentum on a bike, you start to pedal and you pedal and you pedal, and then you start to get tired, but you can coast. You can use the momentum. And it's the same thing when you sit down and you open that report and you're like, all right, what is this thing? Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. Okay, here's what I want. Right. Yeah, okay, got it. So that's brain power momentum, and we have so few opportunities to do that.
Great.
Yes, brilliant. Okay, the second one is communication debt.
Yes, communication debt is not my term. I sort of co-opted it with permission by an entrepreneur named Henry Poydar. But I love it because I think it's so great. It's this idea that we always owe someone some sort of communication. What I sometimes call it is the tyranny of the little red circle. Right? If you look at your phone and there's the red circle on the text and the red circle on the Slack and the red circle on the email and the red circle on the LinkedIn and the red circle and you're like, I got to clear these circles. I got to clear them. It always owes someone something, and we can just never get out of communication debt. It's almost impossible.
So true. I don't know about you, but there's some people who can leave the circles, but I can't leave the circles.
Yeah. What you got to do? You got to turn off the circles. That's what you have to do. That's the thing that frees you from the tyranny of the communication debt, right? You'll see it when you see it.
Totally. Very good point.
Yeah. That's a really great tip because I find that when you see these red circles, and sometimes actually, and I feel my heartbeat starts racing because I'm like, okay, I need to answer, I need to react to all these red circles. So yeah, that's a great one. Sorry, Joe, back to your rapid fire.
We're almost done in the rapid fire. So the third question in our quick fire round. Maybe you might need a little more time for this, Maura, and we'll give you a bit more time. But it's around this thing called the 4 quadrants of attention management for productivity. What is that all about, the 4 quadrants?
Sure. Well, I can explain the concept in the rapid fire without getting too much into detail. But the 4 quadrants of attention management is a model that I created, and it's a 4 quadrants model. Most people are familiar with that, right? High, low on one axis, on both axes, right? And it's just about how much the 2 metrics on the axes are how much control are you exerting over your attention and how much attention are you getting as a result. And so the 4 quadrants sort of help you identify like which brain state am I in and is that the right state to serve me in this moment for the thing that I'm doing now, whether it's a task or an experience or a conversation or, whatever the moment is my brain state the one that is going to produce the best results for me in this moment? That's what the 4 quadrants is about.
Can I think about that then as some sort of quick analysis of your brain state to then see what task you could best do in that moment in time? Is that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 ways to use it, right? You can, and of course it's an oversimplification because our brains are very complicated, right? But it's just sort of a quick analysis and you have 2 options. If you recognize, and what the most important thing is to recognize the brain state. And if you can recognize the brain state, and that's what the practice of attention management helps you do. But if you can recognize the brain state and then you can analyze it, will it serve me in this moment? You have 2 choices, right? If it doesn't, you can either do something different or you can change your brain state. And both are viable options. It just depends on, sort of the situation that you're in.
I actually like to ask something following that. Could you then maybe explain to us how you could do that, change your brain state? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. The fastest way to change your mental state is to change your physical state. So taking a break, and I think this is really important to sort of take a second to talk about as well, because a lot of people will take a break. They'll say, I've just been working on this spreadsheet, so now I'm going to take a break. So I'm going to go to ESPN and read the sports scores. It might be more interesting to you, but that's not really a break for your brain, right? It's still sort of the same kind of mental activity, even if it's a different topic. So you have to do something different. And that's one of the great things I think that working from home allows us, right? When you're at work and you sort of have a desk and you have to sit at your desk, and yeah, you can get up and get a cup of coffee and whatnot. But when you're home, you can, jump up and fold the laundry or, empty the dishwasher, take the dog around the block or, play with the cat or whatever. And all of those household distractions actually involve physical movement. And so that physical movement is a great way to change your brain state. And when we stand up and move, here's the thing. A lot of people are like, I don't have time to take a break. But the thing is, your brain functions better when you move your body. It sends oxygen, it oxygenates your blood. That oxygenated blood goes up to your brain and it makes your brain work better. So then when you sit down to do whatever it is you need to do, you're going to be in a better position to do it. So your physical state is the best way to change your mental state.
I love it. And I love how a whole household task can actually play a positive role in that. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yes, no, I find this super interesting, Maura. Thank you so much for these great tips. We wanted to, we're already well into this episode. It's been such an interesting episode. We wanted to shift back onto maybe the organizational level. We have a bunch of HR people listening in, whether they're HR leaders or managers, and wanted to really focus in on maybe this idea of teams and productivity in teams. So a lot of the things here is about the individual level that we've been talking about so far. Do you have any tips or thoughts on what productivity looks like in a team environment?
I do, yes. So the first thing, it can't be overstated, is that the productivity of the team will never improve if the productivity of each individual on the team doesn't improve. And so ultimately what I teach, attention management is a big piece of it, but ultimately what I teach is what I call a workflow management system. And by workflow management system, I don't mean software or apps, although those have their place. What I mean is your collection of habits and behaviors for how you store and organize and prioritize and manage and most importantly, execute on your own work. Because once people are efficient at managing their own work, then it's so much easier to recognize the inefficiencies in how the team works. And all of those things, when I work with teams and I teach the individuals how to be more productive, they get it and they start to do it. And then that makes all of the organizational inefficiencies sort of rise to the surface. Well, now that I'm doing this, I see that the way we do that is ridiculous. And why is that happening? And we need to fix that. And so that's the first thing about teams. The fastest path to increasing team productivity is to improve the productivity of the individuals on the team. But the other thing to consider is that the way knowledge workers get their work these days is typically ad hoc, right? Anybody can send anybody an email about anything, and that sort of becomes your work. And that's not efficient. It's not thoughtful. It's not, it just sort of makes people approach their work in a very ad hoc way that doesn't allow them to build up brain power momentum. And so looking at the way work gets done in an organization, the work gets assigned and distributed and flows through the organization is another important way to improve team productivity.
These great tips, they just keep coming. I'm listening to them and I'm thinking, wow, this is, I don't know how many really, really useful thing that you said, Maura. This is awesome. Another thing that we were wondering about is when we talk about productivity, it can seem sometimes that there's this endless pursuit of trying to figure out how we can just cram more and more stuff into our lives and get more done. That's obviously not what productivity is about. But in your opinion, what should be the ultimate goal in productivity?
Yeah. So there is one specific definition of the word productive in the dictionary, and this is the one that guides my work. And the dictionary definition says achieving or producing a significant amount or result. Now, there's a sort of a manufacturing piece in there, right? Producing a significant amount. If we take that production piece out, what I think we're left with is the personal productivity piece, achieving a significant result. So to me, how productive you are in a given day is how much progress you have made on the results that are most significant to you personally and professionally. And you get to decide what significance means, and the significance changes with the time horizon. So what's most significant for you today will be different when you look back on a week and say, what was most significant for me this week or this month or this quarter or this year or ultimately this lifetime. I think ultimately our most significant results, and this is the thing that we can't lose sight of, our most significant results are the relationships that we form with other people, the way that we impact other people, and the legacy that we leave behind when we're gone.
So what I'm hearing as well, Maura, is that productivity always comes back to actually asking yourself, like, what is the most important things to actually try to achieve, instead of just spending so much time being distracted and just doing things, because it's so easy to get lost in that.
Absolutely. I tell my clients, my two guiding questions are, what kind of person do I want to be? And what kind of life do I want to lead? And it might seem disconnected, but really you can tie those two questions to every single thing on your to-do list, right? Am I keeping my commitments? Am I having a positive impact on other people? Am I living a life of choice, or am I living a life of reaction and distraction?
These are hard questions to answer, though, I imagine, for a lot of people.
I think sometimes people overcomplicate them. And in that case, it's like, what do I want to achieve with my life and those kind of things. But really, I think for most people, when I ask them, what kind of person do you want to be? They say, I want to be kind and I want to be thoughtful and I want to be caring and right. I want to be loving and what kind of life do you want to lead? I want to lead a life of impact and I want to lead, I want to matter, have an impact on other people. And, I want to be giving and I want to be right. All of those kinds of things. So when it really comes down to it, I think most people, I ask audiences all over the world these two questions and they give me the same two answers all the time. The same set of answers all the time.
Yes. Beautiful, meaningful way to wrap this all up, Maura. That's awesome. One question we love to ask before we finish every episode, Maura, is whether you would like to leave our listeners with a bit of a challenge. Maybe, taking what we've spoken about today, what's a challenge that you would leave them to sort of maybe include in their daily life from now on?
Yeah. So many people's behaviors are guided by what they think they have to do. I have to answer my emails right away. And I have to be available for work at 11 o'clock at night. And I have to work on the weekends. And, I have to whatever. But the truth is, so my challenge is question those assumptions and perhaps even test those assumptions. If you put more boundaries around your attention and around your life, this is when I work and this is when I don't. And if there's an emergency, you'll have to find another way to get me, for example. So the challenge is question those assumptions, test them, and that very likely could lead you to a happier, more balanced life.
I need to go back and listen to this whole episode and just make notes and see how I can include it in my life. Right, Neely?
Same, Joe. Absolutely. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Very cool. Well, want to thank you so much, Maura, for your time. Could you maybe tell us, we see your books behind you, and you mentioned your latest one, To Do to Done?
From To Do to Done.
From To Do to Done. Could you tell us maybe a little more about what's in that book and where people can buy it?
Sure. So From To Do to Done is the second book in my Empowered Productivity series. So the workflow management system I mentioned that I teach is called the Empowered Productivity System. The first book in the series is the green one, Attention Management. And the second book in the series is From To Do to Done. So attention management is just what it sounds like, right? Helping you manage all those distractions. From To Do to Done is about how to manage your to-do list and your responsibilities. And you can learn all about all of that and the rest of the books in the series at maurathomas.com.
maurathomas.com. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But want to finally say thank you so much once again, Maura, for that. Any last words from you, Neely?
Nope. Can't wait to re-listen to this episode, Joe.
Yes, same. And just before we leave you, listeners, we wanted to encourage you that if you have enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you subscribed, if you shared the podcast with a friend, tell them all about it. That would be so great for us, and we would absolutely love that. Otherwise, we're going to see you again next week. So goodbye.